living on Woleai. Nothing's happened for decades. And suddenly you've got this huge mothership, little tenders. They're building a new road. They've got bulldozers and containers and and there are about 30 people living there on site, 30 Chinese men living there on site. So the locals find it very fascinating, and it is physically located right next to the high school. Now, the runway is right next to the high school. Now, there are issues with the work site. There are already concerns about grooming of the young women. And remember that this is a place where the women and girls traditionally go around topless. There were problems initially when they set up their housing. They had a sewage pipe that was dumping raw sewage straight into the taro patch, which is the primary food supply. That was raised as an issue, and the locals were told that they had taken care of it, but it's very hard to know how they could have taken care of it because this is a coral atoll. So unless they brought their own sewage tank, which if they had, one assumes they would have used it from the start, they just dug a hole into the coral and are dumping their raw sewage right into the island, which has a very thin freshwater lens and is incredibly porous. So there's a lot of concerns about corruption of all sort, physical environment, the local women, all that stuff associated with this work site. They finally got a translator. Initially, they didn't even have a translator. So when the locals were saying, "Don't dump your raw sewage in our food," they couldn't communicate. And they brought in a translator. Now they can communicate, but I don't know where that raw sewage is going. This is 30 men for 7 or 8 months on a very small island. So that's, and there's no supervision. Remember what we talked about before with the federal government doesn't care and the Yap government doesn't care. They have.
I'm getting echoes of like Belgium, Congo, and just the complete free reign.
Yeah, so nobody is there. The Yappies, and the Yappies government, they have the money for another boat. The Japanese want to help with another boat. They have environmental supervisors. They have their own EPA that could go and do verification, and they've been repeatedly requested. The traditional chiefs, want this to be supervised. But at the same time, you have a situation where the locals really, really need this runway. People will die if they don't have a runway, if they can't medevac their people off the island. So it's there. And again, this is a compact state. Anytime you hear people whining about, the U.S. gives too much money to the compacts, they're spoiled, they're, whatever. There's a lot of oversight that needs to be done. And this goes back to this block and build thing. You need to block the malign influence, but also build up alternatives. And right now in Woleai, neither is being done. And so
Matt has a note that, a proper ferry would be like $10 million. And California has spent $15 billion on high-speed rail that nobody uses.
Yeah, and a proper ferry would also could be deployed by the U.S. military in case of humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery, or in case of military, like the idea of dual use infrastructure isn't just a Chinese idea. And the locals, if you're on Woleai, you were colonized by the Spanish for a few hundred years. They're almost all Catholic. Then you were handed off to the Germans. Then the Germans lost you to Japan. Then you were reverted to the UN, then the Navy, then the US, and now you're independent. Empires come and go. You are doing your best to survive. There are incredibly dedicated and loyal people who will fight for their own independence if they're given a chance, but they need the corruption to be cleared away. And there needs to be, right now, the U.S. is predominantly dealing with YAP through the national government because, there's this, you always have to deal with the national government. National government's very in China's pocket. And then even if they get past the national government and get to the Yapese government has its own whole set of priorities. So the people actually to be working with are the traditional chiefs who are from the outer islands, who know what's going on across the region and who are just trying to deliver for them. But the focus that I've seen has predominantly been, until very recently, the U.S. used to send up to admiral level somebody to attend the Ulithi High School graduation. This year, there were because of the traditional relationship with Ulithi, this year there was nobody from the U.S. government. The only American that was there was the pilot from Pacific Mission Aviation.
So even though there's supposedly $2 billion coming in, there's a lot of still hands off.
I mean, I think they're going to have a very hard time delivering. I mean, when I was there, there was a Seabees crew, for example, that was supposed to do. I mean, I'd also, this is a better example, actually. There were Marines who were supposed to build something, and the project that they were supposed to build couldn't really function. And so, as it happened, the principal of the junior high is a former Marine, and he's Yapese, but he's a former Marine. And he just told the Marines, come dump your stuff here and we'll find stuff for you to do. But they're going to find operating very difficult for a lot of different reasons. But you even have a situation where, the Federal Ministry of Infrastructure, that minister is considered quite close to China. And his son is now in YAP and has set up a contracting company and is trying to get some of the subcontracts from the DoD projects. And he's looking at getting support from Chinese operators in order to deliver on some of those DoD contracts. Like, it's a mess. But if I can find this out...
Wait, sorry. He's getting help from China to deliver on U.S. Defense Department contracts.
That's what he wants to do. Okay? And I don't know... I don't know whether...
I don't know how he's not seeing red flags here.
Literally.
The one Cleo was almost holding.
I wasn't there for very long, and I just scratched the surface, and this is what the surface looks like. So, and there are people there who know a lot, but it's the sort of situation where if you talk about it, you're putting a target on yourself until you start to clean up the corruption and the influence operations. And if you're the United States of America, start looking beyond the federal government of the Federated States of Micronesia and start talking to actual locals and figure out how to work with allies like Japan to make sure that a Japanese ferry goes in and that the China aid boat doesn't sink on your watch and kill hundreds of people, including people who will undoubtedly be ex-U.S. service members, parents of U.S. service members, on your watch as U.S. ambassador.
Well, Cleo, I mean, this is so great that you're doing this work because, again, this is something most people don't understand. But like, this is where a war could and maybe will happen. And right now, China is making all kinds of inroads right under the U.S.'s nose. But you're getting under the Chinese Communist Party's nose, and we're right there.
That was just one clip from our hour-long podcast with Cleo. Want to watch the whole thing? Want to download the MP3 and listen to it while driving or washing your dog? Then sign up over at ChinaUncensored.tv to get the full podcast and hundreds more. I'll see you there.